All right. Hello, fam. Welcome to what I think is probably episode 5 or 6 um, of the Crypto Conspiracy live streams. And today I'm by myself, no guests. We are we are going to talk about a couple of different conspiracies. One of the things I realized last week during last week's stream, if you were here with us, really getting to use or getting to know the software I use for streaming, kind of got hung up last week, and so I thought I would do this week's stream and do a lot of screen sharing. That way, I'm practicing the production side of what I'm doing here. We're also going to talk about the channel is centered around basically beginners in crypto. I want to appeal to people that are new to crypto or newer to crypto. You may have some experience, but you may also not know some of the basics. When I got into crypto, Bitcoin was already, let's see, was already going on 11 years. Uh, of blockchain technology had already been developed. So even if you've come into crypto in the last 4 or 5 years since the last bull market cycle, chances are a lot of what happened before that has kind of been lost. And I think that especially in the pulse chain community, the ethos of blockchain technology, of Bitcoin in particular, the philosophy behind blockchain technology and behind Bitcoin in particular really has driven the pulse chain community. It's what drove Richard Hart to create HEX. And so tonight we're going to kind of talk about those, what I kind of look at as humble beginnings and some of the mistakes maybe that I made, that other people made getting into the HEX community, and how to avoid those pitfalls. And hopefully that will create a better crypto experience for you. Just a couple of reminders. Our regular shows are Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central Time. After the next couple of weeks, I'm going to add a couple of live streams. I hope to add a Saturday stream, Saturday morning stream, and at least one other stream, probably Monday nights, I think is what I'm looking at, or Monday evenings. So hopefully we'll be hitting it a little bit harder. I think I've told some of you, or maybe mentioned it on one of the streams. I'm a high school band director, so we're right in the middle of football season, Friday Night Lights here in Texas. So it's a busy time. This week, I don't know how familiar you guys may be with uh, Friday Night Lights, football in Texas, but accompanying the big push for football at this time of year in Texas, high school football, which, by the way, some of the best sporting events you can feast your eyes on that you can attend live is high school football in Texas. It's the best entertainment you can find. And but along with that, the bands that perform at halftime are absolutely phenomenal, and that became a big deal in Texas as well. So you have bands that put together these lavish shows, halftime shows, that then they go and compete both at the state level and nationally. So that's kind of my life during the fall. That's why I've been so busy. And we have that main contest this Saturday. So hopefully my kids will do great at contests, and people all across the state. The third Saturday in October for marching band director is D-Day, basically every year. So um, we are going to add those shows probably starting after the next week or so. I'll add the Saturday first, and then we'll add the Monday. Hopefully by Thanksgiving or so, we're doing 3 shows a week. I'm also going to be open to streaming with anybody in the community. I'm going to start reaching out now that I feel like I have my chops a little bit better, not so freaked out about jumping on and streaming. I feel like that'll be beneficial too, reaching out to a lot more of the already established influencers, some of whom we're going to talk about tonight. In the meantime, I'm going to learn how to carry a conversation and greet the people in chat. I hope you guys will be patient with me as I learn how to do all of the production side. So first thing I want to do is just kind of take a look at what's going on, some of the things that popped out to me on Twitter this week. And if you're conspiracy minded, you will likely know what I'm talking about because you probably subscribe to a lot of the same channels or a lot of the same people and influencers that I do on Twitter or X, as it's called. So here we go. Our first presentation is going to be this little, and you can see I wasn't very nice when I reposted this, but the WHO director
side, I think
let's see what he has.
it's time to be more aggressive, more than 14 million children in 2022 did not receive a single dose of vaccine. Working together with partners like Gavi and UNICEF, we aim to halve that number by 2030. But you know the serious challenge that's posed by anti-vaxxers, and I think we need to strategize to really push back because vaccines work, vaccines affect adults, and we have science, evidence on our side. I think it's time to be more aggressive in pushing back on anti-vaxxers. I think they use COVID as an opportunity and all the havoc they're creating. More than 14 million children in 2022 did not receive a single dose of vaccine.
All right, so I would imagine most of the people that I know, most of the people that I am friends with, either online or in person, are basically anti-vax. And now a lot of us were anti-vax before COVID hit, but most certainly when we saw what was going on with COVID, man, our antennas went up. I venture to say there are very few conspiratorial minded people in crypto that took the juice. And with everything that's come out, it's hard to believe they're even still pushing this. The CDC at one point or another basically admitted, yeah, the vaccines, I forget, we really can't say that, the quaxines, they weren't as effective as they said, and I mean, anybody that watched this unfold should have been suspicious from the get-go. Most of us that grew up, in my era, grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s. We saw how long it takes to develop any type of medicine or vaccine. And when they came out with this thing and said that number one, that it was 100% effective, and when they came out with it so quick, I mean, we all knew something was wrong. So it's hard for me to believe that these people are still pushing this thing, that it's still on the vaccine schedule. And I think it just goes to show you that the people that control our realm, or that think they're in control of our realm, this idea that you just repeat the lie, repeat the lie, repeat the lie, they know that works with a great many people. And so they are going to gloss over. I don't know if you guys saw this earlier this week. It came out that the archive, the Internet Archive, I know it as the Wayback Machine, right? So if you're not familiar with the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive, for example, like the CDC, when they put stuff on their website in the past that contraindicated the use of quaxines, right? Anything that was negative that they had to basically come out and admit, either about a lawsuit or about, maybe something they did behind the scenes in terms of funding, anything that could cast a doubt on the quack-scene and big pharma. um, the Wayback Machine would archive those posts, right? So when the CDC decided they wanted to take that stuff down to basically censor themselves, or for any government three-letter agency or organization, right? You could always go back and find the archived web pages where, in fact, and prove to people, yeah, the CDC did admit this, or Big Pharma did admit this, or yeah, there was a lawsuit that somebody won, where the guy couldn't prove the earth was round. I mean, so all that stuff was archived. Well, that site got hacked this last week, and the Wayback Machine is gone. I don't know that it's been returned yet, but talk about major censorship. That was something that those of us that are conspiracy minded, we really relied on the archived internet data where we could go back and pull information, pull studies about quack scenes in general, right? Pull up old documentation, and that has since been censored, but we could still find it on the Wayback Machine, and now that's gone. So let's go on to our next. The next person we would like to hang from the gallows, aside from the WHO. And hey guys, speaking of conspiracies, the guy that is in charge of the WHO, he really reminds me of the during Bill Clinton's administration. I don't remember what post he held, but it was a black guy, obviously. It looked just like this guy, but he died in a plane crash. And I can't remember the guy's name, or I'll have to go back and find it. But those of us that are conspiracy minded, I know I do. I think a lot of these people that are on the world stage, or so-called people, I don't even know if they're human, but I think these are just actors, and they're put in roles over and over to serve a purpose, to serve the elite agenda, whatever. And this guy is one of them. He reminds me, he's a dead ringer for the guy that was in Bill Clinton's cabinet, and he died in a plane crash. And then several years later, he shows up as the WHO director. I remember the first time I saw him, I thought, wow, man, that looks just like so-and-so. And I went back and found pictures. Of course, that was before it was really popular, in the conspiracy realm, even, that these people were playing multiple roles, right? So let's check out our next elitist scumbag and see what they are up to. All right, everybody's going to recognize this young man, or has been.
We've already seen so many catastrophic consequences that are exactly what the scientists predicted would occur, and yet it has not brought us across the political tipping point. But now the relationship between humanity, as our civilization is currently organized, and the surprisingly fragile ecological systems of the planet are creating a worsening crisis. And the fact that the scientists have been proven exactly correct in what they predicted would happen today should cause us to listen more carefully to what they're warning us now of what will happen in the years ahead unless we stop using the sky as an open sewer. This thin shell of atmosphere around the planet, we're putting another 162 million tons of heat trapping pollution into it every single.
Hey guys, first of all, I remember back in the 70s, number one, this is one of the ways they scare people into doing all kinds of things, right? We're destroying the planet. In the 70s, I was in junior high school, I was in high school in the 80s, and I can remember having conversations, based on what we saw on TV and read in the newspaper, read in magazines. talking to my cousin about how horrible it was that, that we were destroying the earth, that we were causing all these species to die off. We were worried. I remember having a conversation with my cousin, wondering if our children would ever be able to see a bald eagle, right? Or an eagle here in the United States, right? Because they were endangered. And so this is the same old rubbish. In the 1970s, I remember Time Magazine and Newsweek having cover stories, over and over, over during that decade, about the coming ice age, right? We were going to destroy the earth because of we were going to have another ice age. All right, then it turned into global warming, right? Then it turned into climate change, and we know as late as the 90s, early 2000s, it was discovered. And again, this is one of those things you would have to go to the Wayback Machine to find, but it was discovered that all of these readings where they were saying that the earth was warming, all of the experiments, all of the stations that they were doing that were reading these, we found out that they were all being hyped. Okay, that they were discounting the actual readings, and they were using some formulas to create the narrative that they wanted to create, right? And then all that stuff got scrubbed off of the internet, except you could find it on the Wayback Machine, but now I guess that's gone too. But these numbers these guys throw out, I mean, this stuff is completely made up nonsense. There's no way anybody can, any normal person can verify any of this stuff, right? Let's let him finish having his say.
Single day using it as an open sewer, and it lingers there on average each molecule about 100 years, and it traps as much extra heat every single day as would be released by 750,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs.
750,000. This is complete nonsense. It traps as much heat every day as 750,000 nuclear weapons. That's another rabbit hole right there. But come on, anybody that has a fifth grade thinking cap knows that this is absolute nonsense. But again, this is the kind of stuff that we have to put up with. The mainstream media, the propaganda shills in the mainstream media, they give this kind of stuff all kinds of attention. Meanwhile, average, normal, everyday people like you and me are made to look like idiots, when we question any of this stuff. And it's all complete nonsense, complete nonsense. All right, I can't even finish watching this guy. He is an idiot through and through, through and through. So that's just a couple of highlights from my week, kind of surfing Twitter and being engaged in the community, wondering what the heck is going on in the world. And it's the same old story, guys. It's the same old story. These people are hyping up stuff to get control of us, to run roughshod over us with their statutory regulations, to create fear in the people that still believe this nonsense. So all a scam, all a scam. And that brings us to our hot crypto topic of the evening. Again, a little bit about my background. When I got into cryptocurrency, it was like a lot of people, through having a small amount of Bitcoin in a wallet that I had used, and coming back a couple of years later and seeing, how $20 had turned into $400 or $500, I think. And then I fell in with a group of people that ultimately we wound up talking about HEX. And it was Dave Weiss, and he mentioned HEX, I think, in the fall of 2020. And so that would have been probably before Big Payday. And I listened to all of the naysayers. I probably somehow found all the FUD about HEX that was available at the time. And so that scared me off until the spring of 2021 when Richard Hart announced Pulse Chain. And so my first buys into HEX were between 5 and 9 cents. And then, of course, I sacrificed for Pulse Chain and Pulse X and became a believer. Not that I didn't make mistakes along the way, even as a believer. But what I thought we'd do tonight is, people that are coming into the system now, HEX, the genesis of everything we have on Pulse Chain, HEX, it's almost like a side note to what has come about from that small original community, right? So we're going to take a couple of looks at some original Richard Hart streams. So first thing I'm going to do is just because I dare say there are a ton of people that have come into crypto since Pulse Chain launched that all they know about Richard Hart is what's discussed about him in influencer streams that they watch, current day. So I thought it would be a good idea to play a little bit of Richard Hart, and I don't think it really matters which ones we get. We're going to look at some original Richard Hart. So here is Richard Hart before HEX. Now, he was already into Bitcoin. He was already mining Bitcoin, and certainly was, well established in the crypto community by now. So let's see here. Again, thanks for being patient as I learn how to do all of the production side things like share my screens. And here we go. So this is Richard Hart. For those of you that have no idea who we're talking about when we're talking about the founder of HEX, and for those of you that may have come in before this is actually before my time finding HEX.
Because most of the things they teach you there, you'll never use.
Well,
Going to school sucks because most of the things they teach you there, you'll never use. Go and look at any successful person in this world. Start quizzing them on things they used to know from school. See how much they still know. Here, we'll start with you. Remember how many planets there are in this solar system? Remember, we lost one just recently. Pluto. Now, do you remember their order from the sun? You were taught it, right? Surely you were taught the order of the planets from the sun and where Earth sits amongst them, right? You probably don't realize it, that you've forgotten because you never used it. Why'd you never use it? Well, you don't have a spaceship where you have to hang a left at Mars or miss your turn, right? So, what could we be teaching kids instead of things that waste their time and that they'll never use and they'll forget and or misremember, which can be even worse? How about how to be a good friend? How to give a good apology?
hey guys, and I just got to say, what he's saying about school is 100% absolutely true. I've been in public education now. I'm going on my 33rd or 34th year teaching in the public schools. And number one, don't believe the lie people say when people say, oh, kids are all the same. They were the same in the 70s. They were the same in the 90s. They are not the same. This is we are in a different world, and these are different kids. 100% guarantee. The second thing is, they're not teaching them jack. Number one, if you're a conspiracy-minded person, you don't believe in the mainstream science. You probably don't believe in the mainstream history. Anything they teach in school is 99% indoctrination, 1% useful information, right? So he is right on about how useless schools are now.
How not to get scammed, how to save your money, how to invest, how to delay gratification so that your investment today can turn into something bigger in the future, whether that's investing in education and learning things that are useful, or, actually saving up some cash to start a business or buy the S&P 500 or whatever tickles your fancy as far as making your future brighter and better goes. So if you look at the world's most successful people and you see that they've all forgotten the same things, maybe you should stop teaching those things. Let's take history, for instance. One of the greatest things history can do is prevent the same mistakes happening in the future. But what we found is, study history as you might, the same mistakes keep happening anyway because the history isn't being referenced properly. So maybe the education and smart parts of history should be codified into frameworks that you can apply to future thinking. And if history was so great anyway, you'd see people learning from the 10 times larger number of experiences they've seen people have through film. The protagonists in films have overcome obstacles and done great things hundreds and hundreds of times, probably per year per person. And you have to wonder how many times those learning experiences, learning through the mistakes and successes of others, have really paid off for people in general. I would say that a well-made, memorable movie is probably more useful for increasing the decision-making skills.
All right, so that's a little taste of the founder of HEX and really the founder of our entire pulse chain community prior to his developing HEX, right? This is what his live streams were about before he founded HEX. Even though he was into Bitcoin, most of his streams were self-help. I don't know, a lot of you may not know, he's written, I think, two different books, not published, but they're out there. In fact, somebody in the HEX community has actually done audible readings of both of his books. So that's a little bit richer art. Now, what prompted the creation of HEX, again, for those of you new to crypto, if you think about Bitcoin was the OG blockchain, right? And as time progressed from 2009 up into the mid-teens, you had forks. In other words, they basically took the Bitcoin blockchain, the technology, and they recreated it. And that's how we got Litecoin. That's how we got Bitcoin Cash. All these other Bitcoin forks that were prevalent in the early teens, the early 20 teens. Okay. And by the time he was thinking about HEX, Bitcoin had become the blockchain had become somewhat centralized. In other words, meaning that the people that did the mining were these larger conglomerates rather than, as Bitcoin originally started, people in their home using computers to mine the blockchain, right? Mining being the act of securing the blockchain, of guaranteeing that the ledger, the distributed ledger that is Bitcoin, was accurate and stored somewhere so that that's decentralized. But what happened over time is it was so profitable that these large conglomerates started taking over most of the mining. All right. So now the mining of Bitcoin is probably controlled by a handful of large mining organizations. And so that poses a particular risk to the idea of decentralization, right? Because if somebody can go in and convince these 5 conglomerates or 6 conglomerates, however many or few there are, to roll back the blockchain or to do some other nefarious technological function that would harm the average Bitcoin holder, then it can be done, right? It can be done for nefarious reasons. And so the the ethos of decentralization was kind of lost by the mid-teens. All right. So the other thing that Richard Hart wanted to fix was the idea of the inflation. So if you think about the fiat system, again, the way our monetary system works, the government basically prints money anytime they decide to, whether it's to hand out to other foreign countries that are in fake wars, or to money launder through Israel, or to money launder through Russia or the Middle East or whatever, right? They can print money anytime they want to, except of course when we have hurricane victims, they only get $750, but that's besides the point. So that inflation that all governments do with their currency is a hidden tax on all of us, right? It devalues our purchasing power. So Bitcoin solved this problem in the sense that the inflation was a function of maintaining the blockchain, and it was a known amount of inflation, right? The amount of Bitcoin that comes into of new Bitcoin that comes into the system, we know what that is. It changes, it diminishes every 4 years, and at some point it will zero out, right? And so we know there will only ever be 21 million legitimate Bitcoin on the blockchain. Okay. Well, that inflation being paid to, again, by the time the mid to late teens had come around, to just a small number of organizations didn't sit well with Richard Hart. He wanted the people, to him, what made the most sense was the people that believed in the project the most, that they should get the inflation, right? So HEX, the inflation in HEX is a set amount. It's 3.69% per year. However, the inflation is only paid to the people that lock their tokens in the HEX contract. So in other words, if you're a believer for the long-term viability of the project and you stake your tokens, you stake your crypto in the project, then you get the benefit of the inflation. The people that are there to buy and sell and trade in and out of the system, out of the ecosystem, those people are rewarded only with price appreciation. Whereas the staker class, or we call it mining now, that's another story. But the people who mine HEX by staking their tokens in the contract, they get the benefit of price appreciation as well as the inflation. And so even though the inflation for HEX is 3.69% per year, because only about 10% of people that own HEX are participating in locking their tokens up. In other words, they're saying when you lock your HEX in a contract, when you lock your tokens in the contract, you are making a commitment just like you would in a certificate of deposit. When in a certificate of deposit, you're telling the bank, I'm going to leave my money on deposit with the bank for 6 months, for a year, for 10 years. Whatever it is, the bank rewards you with interest. The HEX contract rewards the believers in the project, people who lock their token in the tokens in the project, with all of the inflation that the contract creates. And so even though the inflation is 3.69% per year, as a staker, you often are getting 15, 20, 30, 40% inflation in HEX terms, not counting the appreciation of the token, annually. Okay, so if you put in 100 HEX into a stake for 12 months, you could possibly take out 140 HEX when that contract time is up, right? So that was one of the elements that prompted Richard Hart to create HEX. He wanted the believers in the project to be those that shared in the inflation. All right. So, so HEX began. You know, there's a big joke. Those of you that have been now, I'm old enough. I've been around in HEX long enough to know this joke, but you'll hear people in the HEX community talk about 2 more weeks. Well, that's because originally, when Richard announced the HEX HEX token being devised, he said it would, you know, it would be a couple of months before the project was finished. Well, as they got into the development, you know, a couple of months came and went, and at every juncture, it was always 2 more weeks, is what he would say, and it wound up taking several more months after that. I think it was a total of 18 months after he announced the project before the thing was live. So, but anyway, let's watch another. Now this, the next clip I'm going to show you, I think is the one, if not the last. It's one of the last streams he did before he went silent. And if you are a Richard Hart fan, you know that he had the ability to have somebody on his stream or to go on somebody else's live stream and debate them in a way that was both intellectual and entertaining. I mean, he could call somebody an absolute dimwit, you know, without cracking a smile and without them even understanding what he had done, right? So let's take a look at the next little clip. We'll just watch a few minutes of this. And again, thank you for being patient as I practice handling all of the production side, sharing screens. And here we go. This is a little bit more vintage Richard Hart, but from probably 6 or 7 years after the last clip we saw.
Can Bitcoin exist with HEX and
Sure.
with Ethereum? With X? Now, what's
There's
the
people
big
that still
point?
listen to records and cassette tapes, man. Sure.
Hold on.
There's
Are
people
you-
that use
are
old
you-
technology. Sure.
Are you angry more so with the maxis than you?
They're
are
the
with
worst. The
Bitcoin?
max is the worst. I don't like people that lie. Look, the
But
price,
Bitcoin
Bitcoin
is
went up 690 million%. You don't need to lie about it. It's already good enough. Bitcoin still did, like from the COVID dip until its high, which took like maybe a year and a half, it still did a 20x. That's not too bad. A 20x in a year and a half. It's not too bad. Ethereum did like a 66 and HEX did like 1,000 or something. But like, you know, it's why
So what
do you want to do your best or do you want to just not do your best? I want to do my best.
Okay,
Bitcoin's
that's
not
fine.
the best at anything.
But that's your opinion, and that's fine.
No, it's measurable. No, it's measurable.
Okay.
Do you
Okay.
deposit your coins on an exchange, Ethereum or Bitcoin? Which one lets you trade faster? Twice as fast at every exchange. Ethereum.
Well, then I can go ahead and be devil's advocate and say, what about the Lightning Network?
That's not Bitcoin. That has different security
I'm just
developers, different
Because that's the
software,
first thing you're
different
gonna get hit
everything.
with.
No,
You're gonna
but
get
like,
hit with the Lightning Network.
okay.
You know that.
So let's talk.
All right, we're going to skip ahead here. I remember this interview. He destroyed this guy. He destroyed.
Comes
the
from
guy.
multiple places, right? So like originally, you know, as a Bitcoin guy, I'm trash talking everybody else's projects. They don't like that. When someone's trash talks your project, you hate them. Then I like switch teams to the smart team, the winning team. It's like, hey, Ethereum's way better than Bitcoin now. It's got stable coins, it's got NFTs, it's got HEX, it's got options, it's got lending, it's got all the developers. You're like, okay, it won. It's got faster transactions, lower latency, higher throughput. If you want to trade on an exchange, they give you your coins twice as fast. You're like, it's better in every way.
All right, so there's a little bit more vintage Richard Hart for those newcomers to crypto or newcomers to Pulse Chain. You've never, if you didn't get into crypto until the Pulse Chain launch or thereafter, if you've been onboarded since then, you've never seen Richard Hart on a live stream, right? And so this is the guy that founded the project that has led to so many people being in this community. And by this community, now we refer to the community as the pulse chain community. But it started with this one project that was a decentralized finance project. And so again, for those of you new to crypto, decentralized finance, in the crypto sphere, we call that DeFi, right? So when you hear somebody say, talking about a DeFi project, they're talking about a decentralized finance project. And DeFi projects came into their own in the last cycle, I guess at the beginning of the last cycle. So prior to decentralized finance projects like, what's the original DEX? That I'm so far removed now that it's hard to even remember some of these original projects. But prior to DeFi coming into its own, you had to purchase your crypto on a centralized exchange. In other words, there was a third party that you had to go through. Well, this was the opposite of why blockchain technology came into existence. Blockchain technology is meant to take the middleman out of the equation, right? So that we can have peer-to-peer transfer of value. All right. So if you have to go on a centralized exchange, you're kind of defeating the purpose of blockchain. But that's the way it was. You had to go onto a centralized exchange, and by centralized exchange, I'm talking about things like Coinbase or Crypto.com. These are centralized exchanges. You may think that you own the assets that are in your wallet on a centralized exchange, but you do not. They can be frozen. So people would go onto the centralized exchange. They would do their transactions, purchase their Bitcoin, purchase their Ethereum, purchase their HEX, or other assets, and then they would send them to their wallet. Well, when DeFi came along, they figured out how to have an exchange that was decentralized. In other words, a product that operated on the blockchain, that was run on the blockchain, that people could interface with, but that did not ever control the assets that they were exchanging. Okay. So this was the advent of decentralized exchanges, or what we call in crypto DEXs, decentralized exchanges. And this allowed us all to have our wallets connected directly to the blockchain, do our transactions, and have our all of our crypto in our wallet, have custody of it the entire time. All right. So this was a big deal, and this was the beginning of decentralized finance. When Ethereum came into being, which allowed contracts, allowed technology to be written onto the blockchain, then you had the ability to have a decentralized exchange. And so with the advent of DeFi, Richard Hart decided to develop HEX, which originally it was called Bitcoin HEX because it was intended to be the better Bitcoin. And Richard Hart still is very serious about the philosophy behind Bitcoin. In other words, that it should be decentralized, it should be peer-to-peer, it should be secure, right? And these are all elements that HEX kind of took over. HEX, even though a lot of people will say it's centralized because of what's called the origin address controlling much of the supply, the origin address has never, ever been proven to be anything but benevolent, right? So HEX was created as a way to allow people to maintain complete control of their asset. So rather than taking your Ethereum and putting it in a deposited account on, say, Coinbase or on crypto.com to earn yield, you could take your HEX tokens, deposit them back on the blockchain into the contract that you have complete control over, and you get to earn yield without ever using a third party to transact earning that yield. And that's what that's what Bitcoin HEX, and ultimately they just dropped the Bitcoin and took on the name HEX. And that's the original product that Richard Hart invented. And the people that kind of grew up around the HEX product were what I now look back on and consider the most ravenous, the most maximalist cult that I've ever seen. Because once I got into HEX, it became the be all end all, right? You were only supposed to own HEX. You were only supposed to stake HEX, never trade it, never sell it, so forth and so on, right? Even though we all knew at some point we were gonna trade it for profit, right? That's ultimately the whole point. But the OG community, the original community, were so diehard maximalist and so protective of Richard Hart and of the project that, at least for me, again, this is in hindsight. In hindsight, well, there's two ways to look at it. Number one, the maximalism may very well have saved a good many of us, right? I think there are a lot of people that have degen tendencies, that tend to like the idea of trading, that like the risk associated with getting in and out of projects. We may very well have liquidated ourselves pretty quick if not for being in HEX. Now, the flip side of that is a lot of people like me too that kind of learned along the way. I think there was a lot of missed opportunity for not wanting to venture outside of the HEX community. I think there were a lot of projects that, again, now I would call, what's a good term? Lottery tickets, I guess, as Sami says. Just throwing in $100 here, $50 there would have yielded me a lot of benefit, right? But because I was in HEX and because that was so frowned upon, I mean, people venturing outside of the community were really mocked, right? You would never go on an OG HEX stream 4 years ago and talk about buying a Dogecoin or Pepe or whatever, right? So on one hand, I see that it may have saved a lot of people. On the other hand, I think there was a lot of missed opportunity as well. So take that as for what it's worth. The end result was that Richard Hart coalesced an incredible community around his project HEX. And ultimately, that community turned into the base of people that supported him in the development of Pulse Chain. So again, originally you have HEX. Once the Ethereum blockchain, so HEX is a contract that is built on the original HEX. Now we call it EHEX, was built on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's a smart contract that people like you and I could interact with, that our wallets could connect directly to. So again, going back to the philosophy of self-custody, and we could transact earning yield directly from the contract. And that was HEX. The problem with it is, as the bull run, the last bull cycle happened and the price of Ethereum skyrocketed, it became more and more expensive. And in fact, it became impossible. By the time I got into HEX, the Ethereum gas fees were so expensive that I did very little staking at the beginning. All right, because it was an astronomical, just to do a transaction to buy HEX on an exchange, to buy $100 worth of HEX when I started buying it. Well, I'll tell you, one time at the height of the bull run, I spent $175 in gas fees to buy $100 worth of HEX. I think at the time HEX was maybe 25, 35 cents, somewhere in there. So that's how cost prohibitive for the average investor. Ethereum had become a place where only wealthy people could transact business. All right. So Richard Hart knew he had to do something, because again, Richard Hart has always been champion of the small investor, champion of the little man. And so his solution was to fork or create a second, using just basically copying the technology that was the Ethereum blockchain, and diluting it so that it was much less expensive to transact. And so now, even today, to do a transaction on Ethereum is going to cost you several dollars to tens of dollars, even in the environment we're in now. Whereas on Pulse Chain, the exact same type of transaction on the blockchain will cost you fractions of a penny, maybe at the most pennies. All right. So Richard Hart's answer to people not being able to use HEX on the Ethereum blockchain was to create a fork of Ethereum, which we now know as Pulse Chain. And again, if you if you've been around the community, that's another joke. 2 more weeks for the Pulse Chain to launch. In the summer of the sacrifice was in the summer, and by sacrifice, what happened, the way he funded the blockchain was people were asked to sacrifice some of their crypto for freedom of speech. In other words, if you believed in freedom of speech and that code qualified as speech, in other words, writing a contract on the Ethereum blockchain, it's just code, computer code that we've typed in, that qualifies as speech, and that none of that should be governed or censored or taxed or any such thing. And on a philosophical level, Richard Hart is absolutely correct. And so his idea to fork Ethereum by using a sacrifice, right, where we all just contributed our money without any expectation that anything would happen, is the pinnacle of trust, right? And again, Richard Hart knew what he was doing, because that sacrifice, by the time he contributed his part, raised billions of dollars. And all of that money is sitting there in the sacrifice wallets to this day, ready to be deployed in a way that somebody somewhere will see fit, right? Again, there's no history, there's no evidence that Richard Hart or whoever controls the sacrifice wallet and the HEX OA wallet have ever done anything other than act in a benevolent way. All right. So when I talk about bringing people into crypto, I want them to know that the community I'm in, the products that I put into my wallet are trusted, right? Not just by me, right? But an entire community of people that have been around Richard Hart and the HEX project for years, right? And there's a long history of reasons we can trust the original HEX project as well as the second project that came about because of the HEX community, which is Pulse Chain. Pulse Chain now has grown into, has taken on a life of its own, right? For everything that HEX was with regard to maximalism, okay, Pulse Chain is the opposite, right? When Pulse Chain launched, it really splintered the original HEX community into lots of different smaller pods, or what do they call them now in education? Anyway, these small, much smaller communities. And it is the most vibrant online blockchain community that you will find anywhere. And again, for new people, I want you, don't take my word for it. Do not take my word for it. Go out there and explore these other blockchains. Go explore Solana. Go explore Cardano. Go explore Sui. Go explore Base. My reading of all the other blockchains that I've explored are that they are very shallow. They're shallow in terms of people that are committed to the success of the blockchain. They're shallow with respect to the projects that are being developed on the blockchain. And again, I'm not talking about not every project on Solana is trash, but in general, I find the intellectual development that's going on and the long-term commitment that's going on Pulse Chain to be the most vibrant of any online community that you can find in cryptocurrency. So that is our introduction to HEX. That's how HEX got started. That's how Pulse Chain got started. The next segment we may go on a little bit further, but I wanted everybody that's new to crypto to get a little bit of a little taste of Richard Hart, to get a little taste of what the original HEX community was all about. Because again, there's no other way to explain the OG HEX community other than they were the maximalist of maximalists, right? And now it's when you're on Pulse Chain and you see the influencers and the projects that are being developed there, it is the exact opposite. Now, I will say this, on Pulse Chain, all these little sub communities that have cropped up, whether we're talking about the No Permissions group, the Solid X community, the Tang Gang. You've got all kinds of projects that have these smaller communities. What is true of all of them, even though they're not, RH maximalists anymore, what they are is very dedicated to the original Bitcoin philosophy. In other words, peer-to-peer, self-custody, the security, decentralization, all of the main topics that Bitcoin sought to address. The people on Pulse Chain, even though they're not RH maximalists anymore, they are maximalists in the sense that they are committed to those OG Bitcoin principles. And so those of you that are new to crypto, if you want to sign up for a consultation, I do consultations on a donation basis. If you don't want to give me a donation, then go and download Dave Weiss's Flat Earth, Sun, Moon, and Zodiac Clock app, and use my referral code. I think it's $2 or $3 to download the app. Use my referral code and then sign up for a complimentary consultation. If you are new to the No Permissions Patreon and would like a complimentary consultation, you can sign up using the same link. There's a box to check for that. Anybody in the No Permissions group, you're welcome to a complimentary consultation. We can talk about anything. If you've already been onboarded, we can start talking about DeFi solutions, how to interact with some of the contracts on Pulse Chain. If you're new to community, new to crypto, we can start from the beginning. Other than that, if you would like information on, well, I don't think I have it posted. For next week, I'll have up a link for No Permissions. No Permissions is a great community to get started in. They do beginner stuff. They do more intermediate, advanced stuff. Again, these are all people I trust that I have been in crypto with for several years. As always, not financial advice. Do your own research with anybody I recommend, but I feel comfortable recommending anything that I talk about on this show. I feel comfortable recommending to my family and loved ones as I have and as I do. So I want you to feel safe. I want you to have a good experience getting into crypto, and this is a great place to start. All right, let's see. Hex Monkey, I still consider someone who invests 90% or more in Pulse Chain projects to be an RH Maxi. Being an RH Maxi never meant no coins other than RH. Hey, I agree with you, Hex Monkey, certainly at this point. Now, I have to say, I think being an RH Maxi prior to Pulse Chain launch probably meant being a Hex Maxi. But you're most certainly right. I think that's kind of an evolution. I saw the OG Hexicans kind of go through, even Richard Hart himself. I think Richard Hart had to take a step back. When he talks about he's never going to talk about any other token other than his own tokens, other than Hex, PulseX, Pulse, and Ink, right? And understandably so. However, I think the OGs, some of them, you could tell they were having a hard time kind of turning loose of the reins and realizing that, hey, for Pulse Chain to be the success that we all want it to be, we have to have other builders, right? And I think now you're seeing the fruit of that manifest itself because we have so many high quality projects. Again, guys, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Go out there, look around these other blockchains, look and see what's going on. And my guess is that you'll find what I found, that the substantive value, as well as the economic and technological value that's being created elsewhere, is no match for what's going on Pulse Chain. So with that, we are going to end the stream with a musical moment. And again, I love sharing a little bit of music with you from time to time. I think we did this on the first couple of streams. And in honor tonight, one of my friends that I actually onboarded into crypto a couple of years ago, I think during the PulseX sacrifice, is here tonight, or was here anyway. Danielle, or actually her screen name here is Ira Aisling. So I know her as Danielle, but I know one of her favorite groups is Walk Off the Earth. And I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Walk Off the Earth, but they're kind of garage band startup, and I find them fascinating. And from time to time, I'll find stuff. And so we'll have our little musical moment here. Share the screen one more time, and this will be our musical moment for the week. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. I love this rendition.
You guys ready? Love me do. You know I love you. So please, I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night. I should be sleeping 8 days a week. Love you every day, girl. You're always on my mind. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. There are places I remember in life. I've just seen a face I can't forget. The time or place where we just met. She's just a girl for me, and I want all the world to see we met. We can work it out. We can work it out. Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding is being. Lives in a dream, all the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people. Lonely strawberry fields forever. It's getting hard to be someone, but it all works out. It doesn't matter much to me.
All right, guys, so there's a taste of Walk Off the Earth. If you're ever wanting something to listen to, something you haven't dipped your toe into, they're a great group, lots of fun stuff. And again, have a great night, and we will see you back here next Thursday for another edition of Conspiracy Crypto. Thanks for being here.